To kick things off, I'm going to give you some extra incentive to finally ship that app that you've been thinking about. So let's talk about RevenueCat's Shipaton for 2026. They do this every year. I feature it every year. It's basically the world's largest online mobile hackathon. And this year, there's over 700,000 in cash prizes. Remember that incentive I was talking about? Let's get that app shipped. Well, here's the requirements, real quick. It's free to join, by the way. You just have to have a brand new app on the App Store, Google Play Store, or the Samsung Galaxy Store between August 1st and September 30th. And I want to stress new app. You can't ship an update to an existing app. This has to be a brand new product, new on the App Store, launched between these two dates. And the other requirement is that you have to integrate RevenueCat and power at least one in-app purchase or serve ads through RevenueCat. And again, the whole point of this mobile hackathon, and the community really gets involved. If you're on Twitter, it's all you're gonna see for the next couple months, but it's just to give you that incentive, that final push to finally ship that side project or whatever app you've been thinking about or brainstorming on. If you're looking for a reason to ship it, well, here's your reason. Because like I said, over 700,000 in cash prizes, there's various different categories. See, there's the grand prize, which is all encompassing, best game award. RevenueCat Peace Prize has the biggest positive impact. There's a design award. There's a build in public award if you like to share your work on Twitter or other social media platforms. And each one of these award categories has their own prize pool. Obviously the grand prize winner, $50,000, trip to New York City, you get featured on a massive Times Square billboard. Obviously that's the biggest prize, but like I said, each other category, first place gets 15,000, second place 10,000, third place 5,000, again, in all of these categories. And like I said, it's free to join. They just announced it. I think there's already almost 5,000 participants already. There'll be a lot more, trust me. They're expecting, I think, 100,000 or so. Again, it's gonna be huge. You're gonna see it all over Twitter and everything coming up soon. It's also supported by the industry, so there's a lot of sponsors, but you get Ship Kit. So if you sign up, you get this kit of bundles, tools, credits, deals, resources to help you build faster. So there's a lot of freebies involved as well. And a great way to build your Shipaton submission if you're building with AI is today's sponsor, Bitrig. Now Bitrig is also participating in Shipaton. RevenueCat support in Bitrig is coming next week. And soon there's going to be a discounted Bitrig plan for Shipaton participants. And if you're not familiar, Bitrig is a Mac app that builds native Swift apps with AI. To put it simply, think of a Codex or a Claude Code. If it was built from the ground up to specialize in native, high-quality, premium apps that are specifically for Apple platforms. It was built by the co-creators of SwiftUI, who were formerly at Apple, and the team is rapidly shipping features with weekly updates. Just recently, we shipped the ability to handle a lot of the App Store submission for you, diffs and code editing, and visionOS support. Check it out at bitrig.com. And while we're on the topic of launching app, Paul Hudson has a great retrospective on the launch of his recent app, Kickstart. And in this article, he goes through basically what went well, what went less well, so other indies can learn from him and do better. So we're gonna talk about what went well, and I gotta address the obvious elephant in the room. Of course, Paul Hudson has a very large audience of developers. His app is for developers. So naturally, the launch is gonna be somewhat successful, but don't dismiss that. You can still learn a lot from this. He says his test flight went well. He did a beta test from February to May. So that's what, 2-3 months of testing. And even if you only have a couple beta testers, it's very valuable to have that feedback because oftentimes you get so wrapped up in building the app, you know it so well, you don't see it from an outsider's perspective. So don't think you have to have thousands of beta testers. You can have 2 or 3 and it'd be really helpful. Now on his launch, he got just shy of 3,000 downloads in the first week and moved him up to number 2 in the developer chart behind only Xcode. This is on the Mac App Store. But what I want to point out is he used pre-orders. So he used pre-orders for a couple months before the launch, building up interest, people pre-order it, and then it downloads automatically on launch day. So what happens is you get a ton of downloads day 1 on launch, which really helps your rankings, right? That's what drove him up to number 2 on the developer chart behind Xcode. Now that may not last because you get that initial spike, but that can be just the start your app needs to really start building that ASO. So now let's talk about what didn't go so well. And the main one I want to point out is that over the 5 months it took to build the initial release, about half that time went into one feature, the video editor. He just said he got really carried away, almost burned himself out. And here's the key takeaway that you should learn. If he was starting today, he would have cut that video editor from V1, shipped 3 months earlier, like 3 months, it's a long time, and then added that feature in a later update. So think about the project you're working on. What are you building right now? Is there a feature that is taking up way too much time or way too much attention that you could ship in an update later? Or maybe you can just cut some features so you can ship sooner. It's very easy as developers to be like, oh, once I get this feature, we'll launch. And then, oh, once I get this next feature, we'll launch. Because you want to make it better and better and better. You just got to launch. So get the features that are absolutely necessary, launch those, and ship additional features and updates. Next up, we have iOS 27 SDK, 3 major requirements that might break your app. Now, this is for typically older apps. If you've built an app in the last 1, 2, 3 years, probably not going to apply to you. But if you're maintaining an older code base that has existed for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, you may have to look at this. So UI scene is no longer optional. Again, if you're building a SwiftUI app and you're using the app protocol, not applicable to you. Older code bases will have the app delegate. Well, now you're going to need a proper scene delegate, and then use the scene will connect to options. And if you're not familiar, scenes are what let you open up multiple windows of your app. So if you haven't adopted scene delegate yet and you're still in the old app delegate, you're going to have to fix that one. Launch screen requirements. Your app will get rejected from the App Store if you don't have a launch screen. And App Store Connect is going to check at least one of these keys in your info.p list. And like I said, the good news, most projects created in the last few years already have them. But again, if you have an older project or you deleted it for some reason, make sure you get that in there. Your app's going to get rejected. And then Liquid Glass. When they announced Liquid Glass last year, they did give you this key that you could opt out of it for that year. But even back then, on day one, they said, hey, this is only going to last a year. We're going to take it away next year. They just kind of gave developers some time. Well, now's the time. So if you haven't done that yet, and you have a lot of custom UI kit styling, like in the navigation bars, tab bars, backgrounds, and you're using this key to kind of ignore Liquid Glass, you might have a lot of work on your hands this summer to get ready for iOS 27. So if you haven't already started doing that, now's the time. Moving on. Apple released an open source package for foundation models called Foundation Models Framework Utilities, and it's some extra goodies that aren't yet built into the Foundation Models framework. So if you want this extra stuff, you got to bring in this utilities package. But what you get here, there's 3 main things. And that is the chat completions language model. And this can communicate with any server that uses the chat completions REST API. This is a common web interface so people can chat with the LLM. So now you get support for that. History management. Speaking of chat, as you're going back and forth in the chat, the context window gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So you need to compact down the context over time to make sure it fits within the context window. And if you know anything about Foundation Models context windows, they're pretty small. So this is a pretty important thing. But now you get these 3 modifiers to help you manage that. And it's things like dropping completed tool calls, establishing a rolling window, and summarizing previous interactions. They say there's no one-size-fits-all solution, so you can mix and match these how you need, but here they are. You can see them in action. Here are the modifiers: dropping completed tool calls, rolling window, summarize history, mix and match, use them how you need to make sure you're compacting that context to fit within the small Foundation Models context windows. And Foundation Models is getting support for skills. There's a new skills type that you see here. So now Foundation Models can work with skills, and then it goes into more detail on how you would actually do that. But yeah, Foundation Models Framework Utilities, open source package from Apple. So if you're working with Foundation Models in your app, you get some extra goodies. Next up, we have anyAppleOS in Swift 6.4. In case you missed this at WWDC, this is a quick little reminder. Basically, we used to have to do these big, long availability checks at available macOS 26, iOS 26, watchOS 26, tvOS 26. Well, now in Swift 6.4, we can do anyAppleOS 26, 27, whatever the number may be. And really, it just cleans up not having to type out all of this. But some quick little caveats before we move on. Again, this was just a quick share. It does also work with if #available, but it is only from iOS 26 or all the 26s forward, because that's the year Apple unified the numbers. So you can't go back and say anyAppleOS 18. Only on 26 and above, because here's the old way, right? Remember, it was macOS 15, iOS 18, watchOS 11. All the numbers were all over the place. That's why they unified them. But if you are going to use anyAppleOS, it has to be from 26 and above. You can't go back. And there's a whole bunch of other little nuances that this article dives into. Won't go into that. Check out the article. But I wanted to remind you, anyAppleOS exists, so you no longer have to type out all this boilerplate. And finally, we have 10 tips for building iOS apps that handle dynamic type. And I like to revisit this topic from time to time because some people say, oh, if you just support the text styles like in SwiftUI, like .title, .callout, .caption, .footnote, you support dynamic type. Technically, you're right, but 90% of the work of supporting dynamic type is adjusting your UI so it doesn't break when there's a giant text size. Like, that's where all the real work is. So that's what this article is talking about some tips on how to do that. All text content must be inside a scroll view. I don't know about all, but yes, a lot of your text will now be in a scroll view. Because think about it, if something on your UI was 2 lines of text, maybe it's like a subtitle, on the default dynamic type setting, well, on the super large font, like I'll scroll down, like look at how big the font size gets on the phone, right? Well, maybe that 2 lines on the default setting is now 7 lines in the giant large setting. So if you're supporting dynamic type in your app, you're gonna find yourself using a lot of scroll views. And you can use the scroll bounce behavior modifier and set it, I think, based on size. That way, if you don't need a scroll view, the user can't swipe and bounce your UI all around. It's kind of like the scroll view will only be there if there's enough content to scroll. And I'll just point out a couple more. Definitely read the article. Point out a couple more big ones. Avoid fixed heights. Basically, if you're doing frame.height and you're like trying to build this, well, here's actually the main idea. Fixed height, pixel perfect designs might look great when they're created and when you're on the default dynamic type setting, but they don't survive contact with reality. I think there was a stat, it was like 40% of people don't use the default dynamic type size. And of that 40%, some of it's smaller type size, some of it's larger type size. But the point is, 40% of the users aren't using the default dynamic type size. So making sure your app gracefully handles dynamic type is important. Here's another big tip. Switch from H-stacks to V-stacks at accessibility sizes. So if you don't know, you can get the dynamic type size in the environment. So you can say, if the dynamic type size is an accessibility size, you can even get more granular than that. I think there's a whole bunch of them. But you can say, like, if it is greater than this accessibility size, use it in the V-stack. That way you stack elements on top of each other vertically in a scroll view rather than horizontally where they're not going to fit with giant text. But the point is, and the reason I wanted to share this, is supporting dynamic type is so much more than just using the built-in text styles. Adapting your UI is the heavy lift, and this article will help you out with that. That wraps it up for this episode of Swift News. We'll see you in the next one.